and Discipleship, Season 3, Episode 8. Welcome. Welcome to this time of stretching and learning and community and development. I am so honored to invite you into this virtual space. Now, something for my coffee lovers. I am going to put a link in the description to a coffee machine that has really been changing my morning coffee routine. My son has even bought one, but it is a coffee machine that has been amazing for my coffee lovers out there. It is called the X Bloom. That's X-B-L-O-O-M, X Bloom. And I'll be talking more about that, but I'll put a link to the X Bloom in the description. The beautiful thing about it is not only does it have like a pod system where you can use the pods, but the pods are fresh with beans. It has a grinder and a scale, all the things. It's like having a fresh pour over every day. And it has been just complete game changer on my coffee routine. You can use your own beans in it. I am currently dealing with a lot of their coffees, but also drinking this phenomenal honey press. If you're in the Dayton area, it can only be found at one particular local grocery store where you can have it, and it has been amazing. It's a honey processed coffee, and I have been loving it. You can only get it at Dorothy Lane Market. But I wanted to make sure that you know that I'm still on my coffee love, and if you are interested in upping your coffee game, that's the way to do it, all right? So with that being said, we've been tracing the seed. I think this is the fourth kind of installment that I've been dealing with in terms of tracing the seed. And I'm not rushing through the text. I'm taking my time as we go. But let's do a quick recap of what we have dealt with so far. Oh, and before I get going, if you are not subscribed, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, share this video with family, with friends, and again, hit the notification bell so that you know when those videos are coming out. So quick recap. As we're talking about tracing the seed, if a tree is known by its fruit, and we know it is, and that's the text we've been in Matthew. You can go ahead and turn to Matthew 7. If a tree is known by its fruit, we know, according to Genesis, because fruit is produced after its kind. So there's no way that you're ever going to get an orange out of an apple seed. So seeds don't lie, therefore fruit doesn't lie either. And there's a difference, as we have been working, there's a difference between presentation and production. What you see is not always what is true. I'll do it again. What you see, specifically with our natural eyes, is not always what is true. And then last time we were together, the key to fruit inspection is to test the fruit against the standard of the Lord and not the standard of our feelings, our desires, or our circumstances. I got to test that fruit, that production, against the standard of the Lord. What is this supposed to be? And not against what I want, what I feel, what I desire, but the standard of the Lord. The text, and I'm only going to read 2 verses, Matthew 7:15, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles, are they? I want to stop right there. In the midst of these verses, and in the midst of the reality of that recap that I just gave, and as we continue to trace the seed, I want to reiterate one important point. If I have behaviors that I want to change, I have to uproot the seed that corresponds to that fruit. If I have behaviors that I want to change, I have to uproot the seed that corresponds to that fruit. But in the inverse, if I have behaviors that are well-pleasing to God, and I want those behaviors to grow, I have to feed the seed that corresponds to that fruit. All of this begins by being able to trace or get to the root of the fruit that we see. What you see on the surface is not the root. Again, what you see on the surface is not the root, especially because some of us have become very proficient at dressing as one thing while inwardly being something completely different. We saw it right there in verse 15. Beware of the false prophets who come to you. How are they dressed? Presentation, sheep's clothing, but inwardly are, demonstration, ravenous wolves. Some of us have become very proficient in dressing outside of our reality. So getting to the root, write this down if you're taking notes as you're listening. Getting to the root requires us to learn how to evaluate. Getting to the root requires us to learn how to evaluate. So if you're taking an overarching title for today's class or today's session or today's stretching, today's workout, I want you to write down the power of evaluation. The power of evaluation. And in verse 16 of the text, you will know them by their fruits, by their produce. And then there is a B part of this verse, verse 16, that we often just speed through. What does it say? Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles, are they? It's rhetorical, but it also points to something. And sometimes I believe that when we're studying the word, we read too fast. Grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles, are they? And so there are two ways, two vantage points that I would like to look at this B part of the verse. The first vantage point or major point that I want you to write down is, write this, evaluation feeds expectation. Evaluation feeds expectation. Now, when I talk about evaluation, I'm talking about thorough examination to come to the truth of a matter. Evaluation feeds expectation. When I know what type of tree I'm dealing with, I know what type of fruit to look for. I'll say it again. When I know what type of tree I'm dealing with, I know what type of fruit to look for. The thorn bush does not produce grapes. Thistles do not produce figs. So when I know it's a thorn bush, I expect thorns. Again, evaluation feeds expectation. If I have evaluated, looked deeply at, in order to determine the truth of a thing, and come to the conclusion that it is a thorn bush, I expect thorns. If I have evaluated, come to the truth of a thing, and determine that it is a thistle, I do not expect figs. Why? Because evaluation feeds expectation. If I have determined that a person is carnal, evaluation, I expect carnality or the works of the flesh, because evaluation feeds expectation. I would challenge you, and I'll give you some questions when we come to the end. You have to evaluate yourself in order to understand or to really validate what to expect, because evaluation feeds expectation. You're in trouble if you start expecting something and you haven't evaluated it. And so the text tells us grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes. Evaluate yourself. What are you? One text in Romans, those who are according to the flesh do mind the things of the flesh. Those who are according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. And so sometimes our expectation is off because our evaluation is faulty. Whew. hear me, sometimes our expectations are off because our evaluation is faulty. Which leads me to the next premise. Listen to this. Expectation prior to evaluation will only lead to disappointment. Expectation prior to evaluation will only lead to disappointment. So if I start expecting something from myself, expecting something from people before I have evaluated, trace the seed, before I have evaluated what it is, then it will only lead to disappointment. If, looking at our text, if you go to the thorn bush expecting grapes, the lack of grapes is not the fault of the bush, but instead the lack of grapes is based upon the identity. The thorn bush doesn't produce grapes. It is unable to do so. So many of us are frustrated with the fruit that we see only because we didn't evaluate the tree. You didn't evaluate what the tree was, and the tree gave you exactly the fruit that it was going to produce. You got a thorn from a thorn bush, and you're upset because you didn't evaluate that it was a thorn bush and you expected a grape. And so let's make sure we understand. Evaluation feeds expectation. If I take the time and I pray and I ask the Lord to give me clarity, because I'm supposed to be walking by faith and not by sight, and the just are supposed to live by faith, and I'm supposed to have the eyes of the Spirit, and I'm supposed to be able to look at things. If I evaluate, my evaluation will feed my expectation. The reason that I'm not frustrated, the reason that I'm not surprised, the reason that I'm not thrown off is because I evaluate it before I expected. But the inverse is also true. If I expect before I evaluate, I'm going to be disappointed. And I don't expect based upon what someone presents. I inspect based upon what someone produces. Remember, presentation and production are not the same thing. How does the text start? They're in sheep's clothing, presentation. So I do not expect the fruit from your presentation. I expect the fruit of what's on the inside. Inwardly, they are ravenous wolves. And so if I evaluate, then I'm going to expect the fruit of a wolf, even though you're presenting the tree of a sheep. But if I try to start saying, all right, I haven't evaluated anything and I have this expectation, I'm going to be frustrated. We're frustrated with what we're getting from ourselves or from other people because we didn't evaluate first. We didn't say, Lord, what is that? Show me what's going on. Teach me what's going on. We didn't do that. We went into it with an expectation based upon a presentation. And so you see somebody and they say, this is what I am. And because our definition of what that should be is faulty or flawed, we have this expectation because we have not properly evaluated. This is also true what comes from our own lives. Sometimes we expect a behavior from our own lives, but we fail to evaluate where we are. You have to say, and I say this to congregations I pastor, you have to say, we are here. Like any good GPS, you have to be able to say, this is where you are before you take off on where you're trying to go. That is the evaluation. And you gotta, I always say it, I know you get sick of hearing me say it, but if you're gonna trace the seed, you gotta be honest. You gotta be honest. What are you seeing in your own life? Evaluate before you expect. Evaluate before you expect. When somebody comes into your life, before you start placing a demand, because sometimes, hear me, you're looking for grapes because they presented like it was a grapevine, but really it was a thorn bush. And that's not the thorn bush's fault. It's our fault for reaching into thorns and expecting to get something out, and we didn't evaluate. So now you're bleeding because you've been poked. You're bleeding because the thorn bush has done what thorn bushes do. If you would have done proper evaluation, you wouldn't have reached your hand in there so haphazardly, because your expectation would have been, I can get hurt. But because it presented itself as a grapevine, you didn't expect it to be a thorn bush. Write this down. Evaluation is feared when truth is not desired. Evaluation is feared when truth is not desired. If I don't want to truly get to the bottom of it, because I'm trying to get to the bottom of it, I want to get to the root of the issue. If I truly don't want to get to the bottom of it, but I want to just look past it or smooth over it or get past the moment or simply get past the present pain, if I don't want to get to the bottom of it, I'll run. Help me. I'll run. Sometimes the reason that the hard conversations are not had with ourselves or with others is because it is easier to flee than it is to communicate. It's easier to flee than it is to communicate. It actually takes no maturity. It doesn't take the same level of courage. It doesn't take any of that in order to flee, because it is easy to justify separation when pain is present. It is easy to justify separation when pain is present. Does that mean that I'll always just have to force things when, no, two have to agree. There has to be a coming together, even with yourself. But evaluation is feared when truth is not desired, because evaluation might point that the reason that there are problems is because of something inside of us, not something inside the other person. Evaluation is feared when truth is not desired. If I don't want to truly get to the bottom, but I'm content with living in this man-made euphoria of my own falsehoods, right? Because that's what we do, right? We create this false image, we create a false narrative, and we live there. If you tell yourself a lie long enough, it becomes the truth to you, even though it was never truth. So I'll never attempt to evaluate when I don't want the truth, because the truth may reveal something that I want to continue to look over. Why? Because once I see the truth, I have to deal with it. Once I see the truth, I have to deal with it. I have to deal with what I see. So let's keep moving past it. Let's keep running away from it. Let's keep overlooking it. And I hope that as you're listening to me, if you want to get to the bottom of it, you got to begin to get all the way down in there and say, Lord, give me the strength, give me the wisdom, give me the supernatural insight by your Spirit to be able to truly evaluate, and let me evaluate without my own bias. Let me have a presuppositionless evaluation of my own life, where I come to this thing and I say, God, the Spirit lead me to all truth, including the truth that I don't like, including the truth that's going to indict me, including the truth that's going to make me look at myself and say, it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Because when we truly are serious about getting to the root of it, to tracing that seed, and truly serious about the evaluation so that I can get proper expectation, truly serious about my presentation and my production matching, then I've got to get to the truth. Otherwise, you can keep dressing up as a sheep when inwardly you're a ravenous wolf. But when I see the truth, I got to deal with it. I got to deal with it. Let's stop throwing the trash in the closet and acting like our room is clean. I say it again. Let's stop throwing the trash in the closet. Y'all know how folks do. Just put everything in the closet, or like when I was a little kid, my parent would tell me to clean my room, throw everything under the bed and go, I'm good to go. That's not clean. It's deferred. It's moved around, but the problem is still there. The problem is still present. You got to clean it. You got to get down to the bottom of it. You got to sort through it. Many of us have bags and bags and bags of deferment. And just because we've been able to compartmentalize Just because you've been able to compartmentalize does not mean that you have truly cleansed. Evaluation is not the ability to throw everything in the closet. Evaluation is the ability to go through everything that's in the room and to make faithful and spirit-led determinations on what that is and what should be done about it by the Spirit. Let me give you this quick set of questions. If you're going to truly evaluate, because let me go back. Evaluation feeds expectation. Expectation prior to evaluation will only lead to disappointment. Evaluation is feared when truth is not desired. So if I'm going to evaluate, 3 quick questions. Number 1, what do I see? Don't use those natural eyes. You got to pray. You got to seek the Lord, and you pray through the lens of the Scripture, because the Lord is never going to show you something that breaks the word. So what do I see? Make sure you're using the right eyes. Number 2, what does the fruit belong to? So what I see, fruit, produce, production, what type of tree does that belong to? If I see apples, those belong to an apple tree. Those belong to an apple tree. And the same thing applies. If I see anger, that don't belong to a joy tree. Hope y'all walking with me. So if the fruit belongs to a particular tree, stop going around looking for pumpkin patches when you know that the fruit that you see don't belong where you want to walk. You got to evaluate, man, that's the fruit that I see. That's the tree it belongs to. Is this fruit pleasing to God? No. Let me trace this fruit back to this tree. Let me uproot that tree, right? As opposed to continuing to, frolic through the daisies of our desires while ignoring the fact that you have other fruit within your garden that is displeasing to God. You can keep walking through the pumpkin patch if you want to, just saying that because I am here, I can ignore the fruit that I continue to produce. But if the fruit that you are producing is displeasing to God, you moving around in another part of your, euphoric life that you are creating by man-made means and posting on social media to determine to other people that this is really where you are when it's truly where you want to be, while ignoring the fruit that you're actually producing, that's dangerous. It's a double-minded man, unstable in all of your ways. So what do I see? What does the fruit belong to? It's funny, right there, before I move to the third one, there was a show that I used to watch, and the name escapes me right now, but the individual in the show, he really enjoyed going into clean places. And he went into one room in one of the episodes and he said, "Who is the person that belongs to this mess?" That was his line. Who is the person that belongs to this mess? He saw the mess and he understood that the fruit had a root. Who is the person that belongs to the mess? Because what he was seeing had something attached to it. And if I can get to the person, odds are their life is just as messy as the produce. So what do I see? What does the fruit belong to? And then here's a third. What are the roots? What are the roots? If you take and you see the fruit, you got to the tree, you can't just cut that tree down to the ground. You got to get to the roots. You got to grind that stump out. You got to make sure that there's nothing else feeding that. Because if you don't kill it at the source, it'll grow back. If you don't kill it at the source, it'll grow back. So what do I see? What does the fruit belong to? Where are the roots? That begins your process of evaluation. Because evaluation feeds expectation. Expectation prior to evaluation only leads to disappointment. And evaluation is feared when truth is not desired. Prayerfully, you got something out of this? Some of us right now are frustrated because you keep looking for grapes when the tree that you're putting your hand on, the tree that you're talking to, the tree that you see in your own life doesn't have the capacity to produce what you desire. If you want a different fruit, change the tree, Thank God for the Holy Ghost and the power of the blood that can transform us by the renewing of our mind, right? So if you're producing something you don't want, you can transform that tree. You become a tree planted by the rivers of living water when you don't walk in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of the scornful. If you change the behaviors, you'll change the composition of the tree. I challenge you. Think through this. May God bless you. May heaven smile upon you and give you peace. This is